All right. Hey everybody, I'm here with Allison and Matt. They have graciously asked me some questions, and we're going to talk about it in this little kind of ask me anything situation I'm testing. They are my guinea pigs, and I appreciate their attention and willingness to try something new with me. So thank you, Allison. Thank you, Matt, for being here. So, do you happen to remember the three questions you sent me?
Yes, I do
Okay.
have them here. And I think what's nice is they came from sort of different angles as we looked at talent attraction. We all had kind of a unique perspective. So the first one, should we go through all of them or just one by one?
Let's just do one at a time. Let's see where they go. And then just so as we're setting some ground rules, this isn't like oh, you asked me a question, now you have to sit quietly while the teacher lectures. Feel free to ask questions. Feel free to kick some tires. Feel free to tell me, actually, James, we can't play it that way because of X, Y, and Z. Let's make this useful for you.
Okay. I will kick it off with just engagement and activation. So I think the question really is distilled down to how do you encourage activity and engagement across a very busy TA team?
Yeah. Well, I mean, is there a team more busy than TA? I mean, depending on the company, there are probably a few, and we wish them the best. But for everybody else, TA is clearly running around. So and honestly, that is one of my kind of like personal bugbears. I feel like when you get some good employer brand work and you're like, this is going to help recruiters so much. They're going to have a little party. There's going to be a parade. They're going to make a little effigy of you. And they say, yeah, James, they built an employer brand. It's fantastic. And you show up and they go, Yawn City, what is this crap? What are we doing here? This is a waste of time. This isn't actually helping me. And it's because, I learned the hard way, is because it doesn't fit the box they're expecting, right? Recruiters think every problem they've ever had can be solved via more bodies and more tech. And for the most part, for the last 50 some years, they have been right. I mean, hey, another body to help kind of source and bird dog some people or to track people down or to facilitate or whatever. Cool new tools. Hey, AI, it's supposed to solve everybody's problems. It slices, it dices, it makes julienne fries, it scratches your back, it tells you you're pretty. Yeah, we get that. Except the problem is those solutions are true across the board. If you can buy tech, your competitors can buy tech. Anybody can buy a tech. And I'm a big believer that the easier it is to implement a solution, the less valuable that solution is, because that means everybody's going to implement the solution too, right? The day you got Slack was really nice until you realized everybody else you're talking to has Slack, and you're like, oh, okay, great. So you have to kind of couch it in terms of what they're going to care about. And I think what you should do is talk about them in terms of how you're solving a problem. So rather than say this is the way, this is a way, I would look at what their challenges are and say pick one thing that's going to make their life a little easier. I'm going to go with a kind of off the wall one. It's one of my favorites. It's that the offer acceptance rate. Now, if there's a more painful part of a recruiter's life than having an offer put on the table and having the candidate say, "Yeah, I thought about it. Nah, I'm going out. I'm going someplace else." That's a dagger to the heart for a recruiter. Think of all the time and energy and effort and all the dragging, the teeth pulling of teeth and all that stuff, and they end up with a no. And you're like, "Oh," and I know the hiring manager's not going to accept a second placer, and it's like back to square one. It's the biggest time suck there is. If you say, "Look, when we embrace employer brand thinking and this particular brand in particular, behind the scenes, we're going to build a bunch of content that talk about this idea. Let's just, for the sake of argument, let's talk about in terms of innovation. This is a place you work because you're going to have access to innovation and autonomy. Always a good kind of combo, right? And we're going to make ads about innovation and autonomy. And we're going to make content about innovation and autonomy. And we're going to make social posts about, wait for it, that's right, innovation about and autonomy. Don't worry, we're going to write some headlines for your job postings that suggest deep innovation and autonomy. It's going to be the innovation and autonomy show. Thanks for showing up. It's going to be a blast. First three rows will get wet. So you're going to just blast them and say, look, here's the thing. We're doing that independent of you. But once this starts cranking, kind of the machine starts moving around, there's going to be a point where something magical about every candidate you talk to. And that is they care about autonomy and innovation. Why? Why else would they have clicked the ad? It's the only thing you're talking about. No one goes to Tesla and say, I want a gas guzzler. I love gas guzzler. They're not talking about that, right? That's crazy. So once your brand is kind of out there and moving and grooving, people who click on that care about that thing. Now, why should they care? Well, because If they care about innovation autonomy, and you've seen it in the job posting, you've seen it in the ads, and you've seen it as you've responded to Glassdoor reviews, and you've seen it in the interview questions, they must care about that thing. And you've kind of proven it because you talk about it so much. It must be a thing that must actually be true about you, right? It's not just some claim. It's true. It's as close to true, as close to credible as one can get in a recruiting situation, which is a fuzzy kind of situation. As you offer, as you slide that proverbial piece of paper across the table, right? And it's all digital now, I get that. But you say, look, we're so thrilled you've been listening to us and talking to us and engaging with us, and we know how much you care about innovation and autonomy, and we hope by now you've seen what we have to offer in that regard. That's why we're thrilled to give you this offer. Now, that sounds like the dumbest, nothingest burgers you've ever heard of, but it can increase your offer acceptance rates by 10 to 20%. Because you're not talking about the number, right? At the offer acceptance rate, it's all about arguing over the number, maybe arguing over start date, maybe arguing over time, but it's arguing about this thing on the letter. By framing it in terms of this is the thing you clicked on, you care about, you want, we have a little sense of you. We're not talking about the 4,000 things that might be true about working here. We're talking about this thing that we've proved over and over again, which means it's something you're going to get here that you may not get in a credible way someplace else. Suddenly, they're showing up. Suddenly you're not arguing quite so hard over the number, and it kind of pulls away from the number or not the number. And so just that one thing really solves that problem. And I think once you get a recruiter to go, oh wow, this is here not because it's fluffy bunny stuff, because it solves a problem, I'm in there, home fries. I want to be part of this process. And that's how you build kind of engagement. It is a bit of a slow slog, and I picked one that takes the longest to work, so I apologize for that. But you can simply say, look, instead of posting we're hiring and getting nobody showing up, because who in the world would you want to talk to who says, oh, you are? Me too, cool, I want to buy a job. You're not actually offering anything other than you have any job. You might as well flip burgers. That's a good one to say, look, why don't we give you 10 different things you could post instead when you're posting about jobs? Let's take a look, and you slowly kind of get them to see it. I think employer brand is kind of getting pigeonholed into the pretty pictures, pretty words game. And I hate that because we're strategic and we're solution providing and we're solving problems. And you have to couch it in terms. And once recruiters are incredibly smart, they're insanely busy. So they don't have time to necessarily translate your good idea into their world. So you kind of have to do some of that heavy lifting for them.
Mm-hmm. That's such great advice, and I grabbed a bunch of notes, and I think you could have been reading from our book because it's very much the experience that we've had. I think that there's pull through when it works, and we've done our best to package it in ways that are bite-sized and that have even elements of gamification and reward built in. So that kind of helps, but I like tying it back to something super specific and tangible, and we're really fortunate that we have this great value proposition. We don't have to spin it too much, but it really is true that from a psychological standpoint, if the candidate is got their eye more on the experience and the culture and the value versus the dollars and cents, it certainly is a better sell or a seamless adoption, I should say.
And the funny thing is recruiters, for whatever reason, are very often unwilling to listen to people who aren't other recruiters. So you kind of have to play a game of get one recruiter on the hook who goes, this is really cool, this is really helpful, and they tell other recruiters, and it becomes this kind of flywheel effect. There's always, look, here's the funny thing. There are always recruiters who can code. Like, they're like terrifying genius recruiters, and I think they're amazing, and thank goodness for them. And there are also recruiters who you're like, Google's a thing, right? I mean, like, there's the spectrum of people who are recruiters is so wide, it's crazy. So you have to find the people who are willing to try something new, show it off, get them engaged, and then they become your ambassadors to the rest of the recruiting team. I have some friends, and we joke about this. You'll never get all the recruiters on board, but you get as many as you can.
Yeah, I hear you. And there's definitely already, I feel like, champions in our midst, and we just need to, I like the embedding in an actual solution that's pain driven every day.
Cool.
Let's see. Another was how do we deliver on global consistency and regional relevancy?
Yeah.
We're in 17 countries, and regionally we have a lot of activity, and we try to keep our pulse on that. However, there needs to be a level of independence and autonomy at the same time being aligned to talent attraction from a unified standpoint.
Yeah. So you mentioned you have an employer value proposition, which is really kind of helpful here, because if you think about what a value proposition is, it's an idea, it's a concept. A good employer value proposition is never read these 4 lines, read them over and over again until you want to puke, and then keep going. It's not about that. It's about, here's an idea. Like the reason people want to work at SpaceX, Mars. End of list. That's the only reason anybody wants to work at SpaceX. It's not because the family-friendly nature. It's not because of the work-life balance. It's not because the work is easy. It's Mars. End of conversation. The reason people work at Netflix is to prove themselves because they know they're going to get pushed. The reason people work at Goldman Sachs is because there's a pile of money at the end of that rainbow. The reason why. Now, think of Goldman Sachs. There's a pile of money. But if you look at their career site, they don't say, come work for us, pile of money at end of rainbow. It's not, they can't say that. They don't want to be jerks about it. But if you look at everybody in their career site, every photo, that's a nice watch. That's a well-tailored suit. Like there's all these indications that it's about people doing hard work to make a lot of money, which is really kind of their shtick. Since it's a concept, that concept must get translated to make sense. In the same way that it got translated to your head to go, oh, okay, I understand how that works in my world. I understand how to apply that. I understand how to think that. You have to help that translation across every team, every country, every geography. So if you say you're an incredibly innovative company and you tell it to a data scientist, they have a kind of idea of what innovation means. You tell it to a nurse, completely different idea, despite the fact that it's both innovation. So how do you kind of create those translations for those different, think of it as kind of not even languages per se, it's just kind of ways of being and ways of approaching things. Like if you have somebody who loves to who can memorize things by singing them, that's just their way their brain works. It's how they're seeing the world, how they're seeing this idea. You just have to figure out, how do I make this idea make sense in Poland and in Vietnam and Topeka, right? All those things to all these different teams. So it is a layer of abstraction you have to apply, right? When you get the EVP and someone delivers it or you build it, you can't say we're done, we're all good. You really have to say, what is the work that's going to make this true, or how do we express this in a given location in a given team? So there is a whole layer. What I would do is simply say, go to that audience and say, can we grab 30 minutes of your time? We're going to spend 5 minutes explaining this idea and kind of pull it back from the language on a slide that you got delivered, right? It's not about the dogma, it's about the idea. And you really ask 2 questions. 1, how true is this idea? I go back to this concept that like recruiters could say a million positive things about your company. People who work there probably have thousands of things they could say. And here you are boiling it down to a real tight handful. You know, there's the biggest challenge when you're presenting an employer brand to an executive, they go, yes, but what about? They want to add on the 4,000 things that they care about most, even though you're like, look, our research says nobody else cares about it, or they care about these 3 things more. So, question to audience, is this true? Yes, okay. In what way is it true? Okay, well this. Okay, how would you express that truth? Not what I just showed you, but your truth that you just told me? How would you tell that to your friend? How would you tell that to another coworker? How would you tell it to a candidate? Record, just take notes. And what you'll end up with are different, for lack of a better word, playbooks. How do you bring this employer brand to a data science audience? How do you bring it to a Topeka audience? How do you bring it to a UK audience? You'll have all those notes thrown in there, and it's language, it's terms of phrase, it is the things that are true in that experience that they care about. So if it's innovation for a nurse, that might mean I have more chance to actually talk to my patients. I have more time, that there's all this technology, but it's not, I don't have to be a PhD to run it, but that technology allows me to do this other thing. That's how they think about innovation. How much more time can I spend doing the work that matters? Like you talk to any nurse, it's the paperwork that kills you, right? It's the thing that you're like, oh God, and the footwork. The other part is, have you seen nurses' shoes? My God, it's insane. The amount of steps they walk in a given hour, it's insane. But all innovation is geared towards those things. So if that's true, how would you gear it towards a given audience? So ask the questions, is this true? And if so, in what way is it true? And the second question is, how would you express that to someone kind of like yourself? Capture that in your 2/3 of the way home.
Can I jump in on this one?
Go for it, Matt.
Hey, welcome back from Portland, Allison. By the way, it's a good
Thank you.
frame of mind for a marketing discussion. I'm sure. But really appreciate this time and enjoyed all your work, James. So mission and purpose, right? We have it. In abundance. And we have values and we have behaviors and we have all that good stuff. But I worry sometimes about over relying on the mission and the purpose, just because obviously it's important, but you can also kind of let that be the thing that eclipses everything else, and not worry about the other things that you should. Like, what would you say if you have a big, broad, overriding mission? Everyone knows someone who's living with diabetes, right? I mean, that's not hard to find these days. And so, what would you counsel in terms of going big with the billboard on the mission, or trying to actually do something that is much more differentiated in every case? Because it feels like a constant struggle between, hey, do we just like get this mission out there, or do we really kind of go in and try to do the hard work of matching up other areas to the value proposition?
So that's a really good question. And I think mission's a great one. I'm spending a lot of time in a biotech sphere right now, and it's just mission out the wazoo. It's just mission. You're like, I get it. Yes.
I resemble that remark.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, and God bless you for doing all that stuff. Like, thank goodness it's happening. But, so here's how I approach it. A strong brand reveals the ways in which you're either an only or a most. We are the only company going to Mars, says SpaceX. We are the fastest, best way to get rich, says Goldman Sachs. You are a only or a most. Now, if you're in a space where no one's talking about mission, you can definitely be the only company talking about mission. If you are the social media platform that cares about people and you have a mission to bring responsible, useful conversation relative to the norm, which is terrifying, to the social media space, you are the one mission. You are an only. Congratulations. Go forth. If you're a biotech or a pharma or in the healthcare space and you say, we're the only ones who care about diabetes, that's stupid. That's impossible. There's no way. So you're left with the most. And here's the most painful question. Do you care the most about diabetes? Do you care more than everybody else about diabetes? I'm going to suggest, based on absolutely no research whatsoever, that's a real hard fight to fight. That's a really hard fight to fight. So,
Sure.
If that's the case, if you can't be a most or an only, it's still an arrow in your quiver. It's still true, right? The place where mission helps is it helps create alignment. So you don't say, we have this mission, therefore mission equals good. You can say, we have this mission, and because of that, we have less political infighting. We have less friction as we make decisions because we're better aligned. We're not aligned towards who's going to make a pile of money, which kind of leads to cutthroatness and kind of leads to pushing your grandmother over to grab the nickel, right? Instead, it says we're all on the same team. We're all on the same page. It's one Dexcom. We're doing this thing together. Here we are. This is the outcome. Saying you care the most about diabetes is hard. Saying that mission creates a better work experience, go nuts. That is a great place for you to live. And I think you can do a lot of good work.
And I think it's super authentic too. I love the question, Matt. And I feel like that the one thing we always inherently knew was that there was this common thread that people had, even if it wasn't necessarily a personal connection to Dexcom, there was that reason to be here and to have an impact. And so really capitalizing on that and what that means to your experience within the company with that unification, it's very powerful.
And Allison, I've always talked about the mission is kind of like the water that fills up the lake, right? But like if that water drops all of a sudden, like there's a really jagged bottom to that lake, and so it's one of those things where I think we got to look below the surface, right? And still use it, but like you said, use it as saying this is this drives these other behaviors, which are the reasons why you might actually want to join, because otherwise it doesn't differentiate against our biggest competitor, Abbott, or other competitor, Medtronic, right? They've got almost the exact same values, right? We pretty much grab them out of the medical device bag, and they're like, "Here you go. Here's think big, and
So
care for your patient." I mean,
so I'm looking at biotechs, and I figured out that there are 7 values they all pick from. Like it's like a grab bag, and they pick 3, or they pick 5, or they pick 8, or whatever. But they're always picking from the same 7, and it's brutal. At the same time, so when I was in a biotech, it was funny because you would ask HR, you would ask legal, you would ask an admin, they say, oh, I'm so thrilled to be here and save lives. Yes, the data science team, I'm so thrilled to be here and save lives, because their choice was to work there and save lives or recommend a video to you on Amazon, right? That's what a data science kind of spends their time thinking about. Now, you ask the biochemist, they would say, Adoy, of course I'm here to save lives. That was assumed. And they would have that, that's true of every job they're ever going to have. So saying, hey, come here and save lives, it's like saying, hey, come here, we're going to pay you. It's like, if you aren't, I want to know, because that's more interesting to me. So there is audiences where that mission is going to speak a lot more strongly than others. And you need to be conscious of what audience cares about what.
It's fantastic. Ties really well into the original question too. And then I think our last one was, I was reading an article and you referred to talent attraction, I think, as pixie dust. I think it ties back to that analogy, which I could relate to, unfortunately. And it's, what metrics? What do we measure? How do we best measure the work and the results, and who's doing it really well?
So there are so many schools of thought on that, and I think we're still so very informed by, and this is the deeply cynical part of me, which is most of me actually, so I don't know I'm not hiding that.
I think this is our first big year of talent attraction too, right? So this is like, at the end of the year, these are the things that we're going to be looking at and showing back to the business and saying, hey, look at all this awesome stuff.
So that's a perfect case. So
not just pixie dust.
Yeah, so when you're thinking about, okay, somebody signed a check or a budget line or an approval to say, yes, go forth and do this thing. When you pitched it to them, what did you promise it would do? To me, that's the most important question. Did you decide you're going to invest in this to attract everybody and their dog to apply for a job because you're the most desirable company ever that existed? And, again, puppy dogs and taisies. If that's true, that's measurable. That's really easy to measure. How many applicants are in your ATS? That's metric numero uno, and you can pull that around in 4 seconds. If the thing you pitched was we'd have better quality talent, which it could have been, it certainly could have been, do you? I'm not sure how one measures that, but I would start to look at anecdotal evidence to say, hey, hiring managers, have you noticed you're getting better qualified people? Is there fewer kind of garbage applicants who are so not qualified? Like the percentage of qualified enough to warrant a phone call, is that number going up? So there's lots of different ways to think about it, but it's the question of what did you want it to do, right? If I buy a Ferrari, and I can't complain that the mileage is bad when I go to the grocery store and fill it with half a gallon of milk, and that's all it can hold because it's a Ferrari, right? I don't say I bought it to go fast and do the groceries. Like, you can't do both. What did you buy it for? You bought it to go fast and look attractive and all that good stuff. That's the metric. If you bought it to say, we want to beat company X, Y, and Z, great. You can find some metrics to show that. If you bought it because it was part of a strategic plan to position you so you could start talking about this stuff, did it? Right? That's the first metric, and that's the most important metric. If you buy talent acquisition, or talent attraction rather, and employer branding and all this other stuff as it is magic pixie dust and just makes everything better, you're going to find that it makes a lot of things just organically better, but did you mean them to? Did that matter? Because the fact that you have 4,000 people for every requisition may not be a good thing for you, right? What are you trying to achieve with that? Because ultimately, there's so many ways to do this kind of work, right? It's not just, you could do the whole thing in ads. You could do I wouldn't, but you could. You could do the whole things purely in content marketing. You could do the whole thing in social. You could do the whole things on video. You could do the whole things on positioning. So many ways to slice and dice this thing. Hopefully you sliced it in such a way to achieve a particular goal. So what was the first goal? That's the metric you care about. Then you kind of surround it with kind of supporting evidence. I refer to them as the knock-on metrics. Like, hey, it did this thing we wanted to do, but also because you want the money to keep happening. You want to, you want the executives to go, oh yeah, if it worked great for $1 million, what does $2 million look like, right? You want that kind of conversation. You can talk about the other knock-on effects, but you can't say, because of this litany of nice things, we should do it again. You start by, we wanted to do X, it did X, it did it more than we thought, it also did these other things. That's great, because executives, in my experience, it's not that they can't remember a lot of details, it's they don't need to. Their job is to say, this is good, this is bad. And if you try and say, here's a bunch of tiny little things, they're going to go, this feels like they're trying to justify. This feels like a tap dance, not kind of a delivery. If you go, hey, you remember a year ago when you said yes, we told you we'd do this. Guess what? It did this and it did it twice as well. Great. And by the way, there's some other evidence if you care. You don't? Great. Thanks so much. Good meeting. See you next year. Right?
Not
That's
just what you did, right, but really what that did.
Yeah.
What you did, what that did, right? Because there's obviously lots of heat and light around what we did, but showing how that pulls through, I think is really going to be important.
Because, good talent traction kind of makes all the other stuff a little better. With a good brand and a well-activated brand, it makes the recruiting outreach better. It makes the ads better. It makes the social better. It makes the jobs better. You get more applicants. You get better applicants. You can do all that you want, but that's not the game you want to play, especially in a political situation, an organizational situation where you don't need them to be up to date on every last little detail. You just need them to be an advocate because they have a good idea that says, talent attraction did this thing. Great. Go forth and tell the rest of execs and keep the money train going.
That's so beautiful. I love it because there has been so much evidence of residual benefits.
Yes.
And so you keep trying to kind of capture those, but again, it's more what's the primary deliverable, the story, the outcome, and everything else is just, the proverbial icing, I guess.
Yeah. And when you have all those kind of knock on and extra kind of cool things, you'll find that some of them speak very well to particular audiences. So when you go want to get your recruiters super excited, you can say, hey, did you know when you tap our employer brand, you get 1.3% or 1.3 times more engagement with your posts? That is not what your exec cares about at all, but it's where that recruiter lives. That's what they care about. That is very much core to their being. So they're going to be super excited by that. So it's nice to have that litany of cool things to use as tools to particular audiences, but to that executive, to the people you have to report up to, keep it simple, keep it focused.
Thank you. If we could just have you like another, 7 hours, I could kind of...
You know what? That's not in the
fun.
scope of this conversation, but those things can be arranged.
Absolutely. This was a great rapid fire Ask Me Anything. Really appreciate you setting it up, Allison, and really appreciate your time today, James, and for all the content you put out. It's awesome stuff and thought-provoking every time. So I just want to say thank you as well.
Of course, thrilled to do it. This was super. I like doing this. This was really exciting. So thanks for being such great guinea pigs. You've been the best guinea pigs I've had so far.
Woo! So title, right. The same for the week.
There you go. Take it and run.
Cool. Take care.
We'll follow up with you, James. Thanks again.
Thanks, sir.